No matter where you go, no matter whether you're at the track or whether you're at home watching it on television, apparently Denny Hamlin still loves embracing the boos from the fans, whether you like him or not. Hey there, race fans. It's Race Day Top 5 with me, Frank 5. Worldwide Technology Raceway in Gateway, the flat 1.25 mile track that provides long straightaways, tight corners with not a lot of banking, pretty much a track that you got to take it easy on your brakes, but it can make for some fairly entertaining research, especially when there's differing strategies that go into play. We had a lot of that yesterday in the second race in the round of 16. At the end of the day, one driver came out on top and locked himself into the round of 12 with no pressure whatsoever. Let's get into all that happened yesterday at Gateway. Number 1, Hamlin gets it done. Denny Hamlin wins for the first time in the playoffs and has locked up his spot for the round of 12 by winning yesterday's Enjoy Illinois 300 at Worldwide Technology in Gateway, beating out teammate Chase Briscoe, Chase Elliott, Ryan Blaney, and Joey Logano for the victory. Hamlin started the race by starting on the pole. I mean, why am I not surprised? 2 weeks in a row, Denny Hamlin's on the pole. They get qualifying nailed. They're absolutely the best when it comes to qualifying. Maybe other than his teammate Chase Briscoe. But yesterday, Denny Hamlin started on the front row, led the first couple laps. Then he lost the lead to Kyle Larson, just kind of hung around the top 5 for a lot of the first part of the race, and pretty much was there for the remainder. And then we got into a little bit of a differing strategies where guys were pitting towards the end of stages versus guys staying out, going for track position and some stage points. Then those other guys would pit in the middle or the beginning of the second stage, and Denny Hamlin being one of those guys. He was stuck deep in the pack, but it felt like that no matter what, he was able to fight his way back up there, especially with the fresh tires that he had, a good race car, and track position being key for him for a lot of the race. You know, he scored a lot of stage points in the first stage and the second stage, and then we get into the final stage. He had a very nice battle early on in the final stage against Joey Logano in the 22 car. Of course, you know Logano's going to be aggressive to try to get by Denny Hamlin no matter what. But Denny, he was doing everything. He was managing the pace in that final stage, despite some of the restarts we had at the beginning of that final stage. But when we got into a long run, he was able to manage the pace. I think he was saving a little bit of fuel when he was leading the race. So, and plus with the dirty air that he had on the 22 car, he didn't let the 22 give him really a lot of pressure whatsoever, despite the times that Joey tried to close up and get by the 11 car. Just wasn't enough. Hamlin was able to make his final pit stop of the race with about under 40 laps to go. He made his pit stop, and he was able to come out and stay ahead of the 22 car of Logano, as well as Chase Briscoe, who took 2 tires. Actually, Briscoe got ahead of Hamlin, but then Hamlin quickly got him back. And then we had our final caution of the race when Ty Dillon hit the wall in turn 1 after he lost a right front brake rotor, and that brought some of the cars that had not yet pitted down to pit road and put Hamlin on the front row, with Brad Keselowski, who elected to not pit that final run and pretty much make it the rest of the way on fuel, which Brad did, but after that restart, he fell backwards on the older tires. Hamlin was able to rocket to the lead, and he did not look back. While everybody behind him was battling for second, third, fourth on back, Hamlin was on cruise control all the way home to the checkered flag and delivered another win, securing his spot into the round of 12. I mean, there's no question that Denny Hamlin was going to make it to the next round. With the points cushion he had, the playoff points he's accumulated with the race wins and the stage wins this year, and the solid result he had despite early adversity last weekend at Darlington, he had a good result, and yesterday, of course, with the result of winning the race and having those stage points, secures his spot into the round of 12 with no problem whatsoever. He had a very nice long burnout post-race, and of course, he embraced the boos by everybody. Of course, there were some cheers from people that were Hamlin fans, but there were the boos for people that literally don't like this guy because he's turning into the bad guy of NASCAR and kind of an instigator. He adds on to the fans not liking him and saying, bring it, it fuels me up. Well, can it fuel you up and make you to the championship 4? Because you missed it the last 2 years when you've had cars capable of doing it. Can you get there this year? That's a big question mark. But it was a good win for the 11 team yesterday, and not only was it a good win for the 11 team and Hamlin to lock up their spot in the next round, but yesterday was the 200th win for the manufacturer Toyota. Dating back to 2007 when this manufacturer joined NASCAR, they were new, they were struggling a lot because a lot of their cars were out of the top 35 and owner points when we had that rule back then, and they weren't really competitive. There were a couple times where some Toyotas had a chance of possibly winning races, like Brian Vickers in the Coke 600 or Dave Blaney in the fall race at Talladega. But then in 2008, when Joe Gibbs came along and joined Toyota, they helped the program get going, and Kyle Busch delivered Toyota their first win as a Cup team in the spring race in Atlanta 2008. And ever since then, they've gone to win a couple of championships with Kyle Busch and Martin Truex Jr. Denny Hamlin's hoping to add his name to that list of drivers that have won a championship with Toyota and finally break the curse or break the narrative that he can't win a championship. So again, is he going to show up in the round of 8 to make it to the championship 4 and maybe win that title? That still remains to be seen. But all that aside, a big win yesterday for Denny Hamlin, the 11 team. They're on to the next round. Number 2, Blaney bounces back. Ryan Blaney, folks, I felt like he had a chance that he could have been the one to go to victory lane yesterday and make up for the one at Gateway last year that got away from him. If y'all don't remember last year, coming off a turn 4 to the white flag lap, Ryan Blaney was in the lead and it looked like he was going to win the race. But as he's coming off a turn 4, he sputtered because he ran out of gas. And that let his teammate, Austin Cindric, go on to win the race. And Blaney settled for finishing the last car on the lead lap. Ouch. Well, yesterday was an opportunity for Blaney to try to make up for that and try to have a really good day to help him heading into next weekend at Bristol. Well, early on, Ryan Blaney certainly had a top 5 car, very good speed, and Team Penske just seems to have Gateway nailed down as far as their racing program for not just Blaney, but the rest of his teammates. They had really good pace in all 3 of their cars yesterday, and Blaney certainly looked like he was going to be in prime position for the final stage to be a contender to possibly challenge those Toyotas of Hamlin and Briscoe. But that all came to a grinding halt when he was in a battle with Kyle Larson for the top 5 in the end of stage number 2. They were duking it out side by side for position. Blaney got ahead of Larson off of turn 2, and then Larson got a big run down the backstretch into turn 3. And as the 5 runs it on the bottom while Blaney commits to the top, Larson's car suddenly drifts up the track a little bit and makes slight contact with the left rear of the 12 car Blaney, sending him around and bringing out a caution flag. And I gotta tell you, Ryan Blaney remained calm in that car despite that spin because he didn't wreck it, but I know deep down inside he was not happy with the 5 car Kyle Larson. But when you look at what happened, Kyle Larson did not intentionally spin the 12 car. Did he make contact with him? Yes. Was it intentional, like, oh, I'm going to go up the track and I'm going to spin the 12 car? No, that's not how Kyle Larson races. And Kyle Larson, he himself knew he made a mistake. And after the race, no matter where both drivers finish, Larson's pretty much like, I got to go up there and I got to explain to him what happened, tell him that was unintentional. Well, after that spin, Blaney lost some stage points, but thanks to a fast race car, he was able to work his way back inside the top 5 in that last green flag run and kept challenging the 2 chases, Briscoe and Elliott, towards the end of the race. But unfortunately, because of the dirty air, Blaney was not able to pass him whatsoever. He almost had the 9 car with under 10 laps to go off of turn 4, but Elliott got by him on the outside, and Blaney, all he could settle for was a 4th place finish, which is still a really good result, and he did get some stage points in stage 1 to help his cushion as far as being above the cutoff line. Now, as for Kyle Larson, he ended up finishing in 12th spot, but thanks to all the points he has had through these playoffs, he has officially locked his spot into the round of 12 on points. Ryan Blaney is in pretty good position to clinch as well. And yes, after the race, Larson did go and approach Blaney and talk to him about what happened. And it looked like it was a calm conversation. He moved off of it. I mean, I think Blaney did realize that Larson didn't mean to do it intentionally. And Blaney doesn't like to hold grudges because he's a nice guy. Ryan Blaney's one of the nicest guys in the garage area. But if you get under his skin, it's not going to be pretty. And he said, I don't hold grudges, but I'm going to remember that down the road in case something happens when I'm racing guys in the 5 car of Larson. I'm going to race guys the way they race me. It's the racer's code in NASCAR. You race people the way you want to be raced. Hard and clean or downright dirty, and it may lead to some really rough outcomes down the road. So Ryan Blaney, despite the spin, came back and got a top 5, but he's going to remember that spin later in case he and Kyle Larson are possibly battling for a win or maybe a spot to the championship 4. Number 3, big day for 2 former champs. Last weekend, it was a little bit tough for a lot of our playoff drivers with some mediocre performances and some rough results at the end of the day. And there were a lot of drivers that were hoping to bounce back and get some good points and much-needed results to help them heading into next weekend at Bristol. And 2 former champions got those results yesterday with solid stage points and top 5 results. And they were Chase Elliott with a 3rd place result and Joey Logano with a 5th place result. Starting first with Chase Elliott, they didn't qualify well, which has been really a rough part for their program this year. They haven't been able to qualify well at a lot of races. But based off of practice, the long run speed for the 9 car was certainly there, and it's really encouraging to see that the long run pace was in that car in practice that carried over to the race, because the last couple years since NASCAR Cup Series came to Gateway, Hendrick Motorsports has not figured this place out and has been underperforming. But yesterday, Chase Elliott had the best performance I've seen from him since we've been coming to this track since 2022. Elliott had a really good long run car, showed the speed, made some moves on those restarts. He was very aggressive, and he was able to get the last stage point in stage number 1 over guys like Shane Van Gisbergen, which was very critical for Elliott. He didn't get any stage points last week. And then he cycled himself up to the front of the field in stage number 2 because other guys had not yet pitted. Then shuffling of strategies came around in the middle of the stage. Elliott fell back to the top 20, and then he got a chance with another pit stop towards the end of the 2nd stage after the Blaney spin, and he was able to restart in the top 15 and found himself in 8th place across the start-finish line at the end of stage 2. A total of 4 stage points for the 9 car. And then he found himself back inside the top 10, where he stayed pretty much the rest of the race and kept making more big moves on the racetrack, passing guys and getting up inside the top 5, where he remained the rest of the race aside from late in the going when everybody was still making their green flag pit stops, and then we had the caution for Ty Dillon. But Elliott had fresher tires than some of those guys on the last restart, and it felt like if he could make quick work of Brad Keselowski and Chase Briscoe, maybe he could have had something for Denny Hamlin. But unfortunately, he got by the 6 car, but not by the 19 car the rest of the race. And he just had to hover between 3rd spot, having to try to run down Briscoe, but also having to defend Ryan Blaney with a big charge from behind. And Elliott and Blaney, 2 good guys off the track. They're good buddies, but on the racetrack, you got to be aggressive, and you got to, it's every man for himself. But they raced each other with respect yesterday. And Elliott comes across with a 3rd place finish, a much needed points day. After Darlington last week, he was 9 points above the cutoff line. After yesterday's race, however, 28 above, a big points cushion that he has sustained for himself for the time being. And according to the points needed to clinch next week, if Elliott can secure 12 stage points and be 40 points above the cutoff line, no matter what point of the race, then he will be on to the round of 12. He needs to get those stage points, and he needs to qualify well if he wants to have a chance. But a great performance by the 9 car of Chase Elliott yesterday, despite one incident that he got into that I will address a little bit later in this video. But aside from that, it was a great run by Elliott yesterday. And the same goes for Joey Logano and the 22 team, in a track where he has been very good at since we came here. He's finished in the top 5 in every single race that we've been here. As a matter of fact, he won the first race that we came to at Worldwide Technology Raceway for the Cup Series in 2022. Yesterday, he was hoping to replicate the magic. It just wasn't there in the cards for him, despite some challenges that he had with Denny Hamlin battling for the lead in the final stage, even though he wasn't really able to get around him despite a couple of runs once in a while. But Joey Logano certainly had some good pace yesterday, especially when it came to the long runs. The 22 car, they didn't make a single mistake all day long. They had good speed, they had good track position, and were able to make moves when they were able to on those restarts. It was just a all-around good day for Joey Logano and the 22 team, because they did not have a great performance at Darlington last week like many other drivers. I mean, they struggled. They ran around the top 15, 20 all night long, and that's basically where he finished. It was just head-scratching to see, Joey Logano, he's a former champion, and I know that's really hasn't been quite the year for him, despite the win they had earlier this year at Texas, but, what's missing from this team? But yesterday, it looked like they found something with their cars that they can take to gain some momentum going forward should they advance. He went from 3 points below the cutoff line last weekend after Darlington to 21 above after yesterday's race. A 24-point difference swinging in the positive way of Joey Logano and the 22 team, and now being 10th in points entering Bristol, 21 above. Got to have a solid night when it comes to points, get some stage points, but they should feel pretty good as of right now. And if he does advance to the round of 12, they'll look back on this race at Gateway to show this is the reason why we are still advancing and why we have a chance to defend our title. But really good results by both former champs and Elliott and Logano yesterday. Much needed after last weekend's dismal performance. Number 4, Bubble Trouble. We've got one race left of the round of 16, and 4 guys below the cutoff line right now are their clock's ticking right now for those guys to try to get out of the bubble and try to get themselves into the top 12 after Bristol next weekend. And it's going to be a really tough battle for a lot of these guys. They are Austin Dillon, Shane Van Gisbergen, Alex Bowman, and Josh Berry. Starting off with the three of Austin Dillon, not really a lot of pace in his car yesterday. Really, RCR in general struggled yesterday. And Austin Dillon also had a rough moment where early in the race in the second stage, he got into his brother Ty Dillon in turn 1 and 2. Thankfully, Ty didn't wreck. He did later in the race with a brake rotor, but that wasn't because of his brother getting into him. Austin definitely felt very bad about getting to his brother, said that's the last guy I would want to wreck at all. Even his teammate Kyle Busch, obviously, he doesn't want to wreck his teammate at all. But it was a rough day yesterday for Austin Dillon with an 18th place result. The one positive he can take away, though, at the end of the second stage, the last lap of the second stage, when many other drivers came down pit road to get some tires to put themselves in position for the final stage, Austin Dillon elected to stay out with a few others so he could accumulate some stage points, which he did, and only has him 11 points below the cutoff line. It could be made up. But he needs to have a solid performance next weekend at Bristol if he's going to have any chance to carry on in the round of 12 in these playoffs. Then we go to Shane Van Gisbergen. This was the track where it was going to really determine whether or not this guy could be in prime position to be, at any given moment, an opportunity to be above the cutoff line after next weekend's race at Bristol. However, that was not the case yesterday. He really struggled with the car. They tried to get some stage points at the end of the first stage, but they got beat by Chase Daly because he got loose off of 4 and lost the spot to him and lost another spot to Ty Gibbs. And from there on, he was just stuck in the middle of the pack the rest of the race. He had a spin out towards the beginning of the final stage, made slight contact with the wall, and all he could muster was a 25th place result, and now he's 15 below the cutoff line. And Bristol is not one of his best tracks, so if SVG does not perform at all next weekend, he's going to be out, and there will be no 88 in the round of 12, especially with the Roval being in there, and we all know that he's going to be a big factor for the win in that race. Probably might even win the whole thing, but yeah, he's going to need to have a big night this weekend at Bristol if he's going to have a chance to advance. It's going to be a really tough climb for SVG. Now, Dillon and SVG, those are the only two guys that have a realistic chance to point their way in. The other two below them, however, must win. Alex Bowman, I have no idea what's going on with this pit crew. They have just underperformed and dropped the ball in these two races so far in the playoffs. They were one of the last teams to get into the playoffs on points after Daytona. And I thought maybe, resetting everything, they could have a relatively good run in these opening races of the playoffs because some of these tracks he runs well at. But Darlington, they struggled a lot, and they had a tough time with a long 40-second time stop on pit road that dropped him behind. He was able to get back in lead lap eventually in the end of the night, but he still struggled for the most part with that 48 car, finishing in 31st spot. And yesterday, things didn't get much better for him, even though at times with the changing of track position strategies, he found himself actually inside the top 10 in the second stage, and it looked like, okay, he's got a really good chance here to have a really solid run and gain some stage points. But the pit crew once again dropped the ball with another slow stop on that pit stop before the end of stage 2 and found Bowman outside with no stage points accumulated whatsoever. And then we get into the final stage. There was a strategy where he possibly could have made it all the way on fuel based on his calculations as well as his crew chief, but they eventually made their pit stop, and as the caution came out for Ty Dillon, Alex Bowman looked like he was going to cycle out there and maybe be back in the top 15. But he got caught for speeding, and he could only settle for 26th place result. So, being 35 points behind, Alex Bowman must win this upcoming weekend at Bristol. Now, he won the pole early this year at this race and ran well early on until his motor blew up. So, can he replicate any success of how good his car was in the spring and translate to the nighttime with a better motor? That remains to be seen, but it's a really tough time right now to be the 48 car in Alex Bowman. But he's not having as tough a time as Josh Berry. Opening two races of these playoffs, the first playoff driver to have problems with two wrecks. Unbelievably bad luck for Josh Berry. Wrecked out on the first lap last weekend. Never even got a chance to show what his car could have done after that third place qualifying effort. Finished dead last. And then yesterday, he was kind of running around the top 15 in the stage 1, and then a little bit seconds later, as he's going down into turn number 1 and trying to avoid some guys checking up, running side by side in front of him like Zane Smith and Kyle Busch, in comes Chase Elliott from behind, who carried a lot of momentum, got a little bit off the brakes, and unfortunately his car clipped the curbing and started to slide up and made slight contact and sent the 21 car of Josh Berry around into the outside wall, knocking Berry out of the race and putting him in a must-win situation at Bristol. Now, the Elliott getting into Berry, that was not intentional at all. He, carried a lot of momentum to the inside. Unfortunately, it didn't carry off as far as getting a little bit of grip, and it just left the track and got into the 21 car, who was kind of getting pinched down there after running 3 wide, but a tough moment to beat Josh Berry, this 21 team. I mean, it's incredible that this team made the playoffs this year with their win from Las Vegas, but things have really not gone their way as of late. Aside from 2 top 10 results at the end of the regular season, the last 2 regular season races, he is now in a must-win situation at Bristol next weekend. Now, he did have a good run there in the spring race last year, finishing inside the top 10, but they're going to need a lot of luck, and they're going to need a very fast car if they're going to have any chance to win next weekend at Bristol. But those 4 drivers, Dillon, SVG, Bowman, Berry, the 4 men below, those guys, they've got to get their act together and got to put together a sterling performance Saturday night in Bristol, if any of them are going to have a chance to continue their fight for the Bill France Cup. And number 5, strategy and track position. That's what a lot of the race was about yesterday, was maintaining your track position and having strategy on your side yesterday. Yesterday, it's a track where it's really, really tough to pass on these long runs, and it showed a lot of that yesterday, especially when you got caught behind guys in the long runs, the dirty air, and you couldn't really make a pass. Now, the restarts at Gateway are really, really, really good. They're so underrated. I don't know why they don't get talked about a lot. But seeing them 3 and 4 wide in turns 1, 2, and 3 and 4 with the multiple grooves is really, really entertaining. And you can make some passes those first 5-10 laps after those restarts, but then after a while it becomes a long run where you really have a tough time trying to close up on the guy in front of you and trying to get alongside and maybe make a pass somewhere, unless if he's on older tires. And that attributed to a lot of the race yesterday where there were different strategies when those cautions came out. Guys would dive down pit road and put on some tires. Other guys would stay out and try to keep their track position until they needed to make their stop. And then when we had those restarts, we had guys on the fresh tires make some moves, and some of those guys on older tires just try to hang on for the most part. There was a lot of mixed bag strategies as far as guys wanting those stage points versus wanting track position when it mattered most in the beginning of stage number 2 or the final stage of the race, or particularly the end of the race when you needed to try to win to get in if you're any one of these playoff drivers. I mean, it's a really entertaining racetrack, Gateway, for the restarts. With these long runs, it becomes a matter of whether or not you have better tires than the other guy that you can make a move on them, and you better hope that you have a good handling car to make those moves. And if you don't, you're going to be stuck behind the dirty air. And as we've seen and heard a lot of people kind of complain about the next gen car being tough to pass in the dirty air, especially when you get into a long green flag run, even if there is little to no tire fall off. So really was the case of the story yesterday, but the restarts definitely made it for some very entertaining racing. Also want to quickly address really sad news that happened in the world of motorsports. This weekend, former NASCAR owner Bill Davis passed away, sadly. He was a really well-liked man, and he gave a lot to the sport with his time being as an owner and really jump-starting the career of a couple of Hall of Fame drivers like Jeff Gordon mainly. He gave Gordon his big break to drive his Busch team in the early 90s, where Gordon would win a few races before he departed for Hendrick Motorsports. But Bill Davis knew Hendrick Motorsports is getting quite the talent, and that came out to be pretty true. He also helped Mark Martin get his career going with ASA, and then allowed Mark to come back to the Cup Series after his first stint. Didn't really go so well, but Bill Davis helped Mark Martin get his career going in NASCAR. So Bill, he meant a lot to the sport as far as, he worked hard, even though he maybe didn't have the budget like some of the Hendricks or Richard Childresses or Joe Gibbs or Robert Yates or Roger Penske back in the days in the 90s and the early 2000s, but he still gave a lot to the sport. He did have 2 big wins as a Cup Series owner, both of them coming with Ward Burton in that number 22 Caterpillar Dodge in 2001 and 2002 when he won the Southern 500 in 01 and the Daytona 500 in 2002, one of the most underrated 500s, I might add. But that was a big day for Bill Davis. He also had a tenure with the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series from 2004 to 2008, where he had guys like Mike Skinner and Johnny Benson driving for him, winning races. And Benson would go out and give Bill Davis, which turned out to be his last race as a Truck Series owner in 2008, the Truck Series championship that year as a pretty fun way to go out, even though at the time nobody really knew what Bill Davis Racing was going to do after 08 because of the economy struggling, and that forced the team to close down operations after 08, which definitely was sad. But some of his equipment did make it to other teams beginning in 2009, which was nice to see his legacy carry on. But Bill, thank you for all you've done for NASCAR. You gave it everything, and we'll miss you. Now we have one race left to determine who goes on to the round of 12. And what better place to do it than that? Bristol Motor Speedway, the world's fastest half mile, Thunder Valley, the Roman Coliseum of racing. It's got so many nicknames. But this half mile track is going to put the drivers to the test this upcoming Saturday night. You got to keep your cool, you got to have a good car, and you got to have drive position. If one thing goes wrong, a bad pit stop, or somebody roughs you up on the track and you lose your focus, you could start a chain reaction that could generate a big wreck perhaps on the racetrack, or you could wreck somebody else and they could get frustrated at you. That's the common nature of Bristol Motor Speedway. It brings out the best and the worst in the driver. And for these playoff drivers, the guys above the cutoff line, gotta keep your cool, gotta have good cars, and gotta stay patient all night long. And if they do that, they could have themselves in the round of 12. But for the guys that are flirting with the cutoff, guys trying to get into the playoffs that are in must-win territory, you gotta give it your best. You might as well give them hell this upcoming Saturday night. So who will come out on top as far as making it to the next round? Who's gonna find themselves out? That remains to be seen. You gotta tune into 500 laps at Bristol to find out. So hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week. Subscribe, like, and congrats again to Denny Hamlin, the 11 team, on their win yesterday at WWT Raceway. Have a great week, everybody. Let's go racing!